everybody. Welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We've got a great live Q&A for you today. We're going to be talking about gluten. So if you're on a gluten-free diet and struggling, wondering why you still feel bad, this is the show that you're going to want to watch. If you've got questions about the gluten-free diet, certainly chime those in. We'll prioritize those. And if you missed Tuesday's show where we ran module 1 of the glutenology matrix, you got to go check that out. It's hands down one of the most comprehensive pieces on gluten ever done. And it explains and draws out why so many people go gluten-free. As a matter of fact, in some studies, up to 92% of people going gluten-free have persistent health issues, persistent inflammation, persistent villous atrophy of the small intestines, etc. So in honor of Celiac Awareness Month, we're doing a kind of a free showing of glutenology. I also want to make it you guys aware. You can watch all 14 hours. If you're new to the gluten-free diet and you really want to do the deepest dive, check out glutenology. We'll put a link in the show note for you. It's glutenology.net/registration. It's there. You can register. It's free. You'll get a couple modules each day over a course of a week that you can tackle and watch those and get kind of an in-depth analysis. You can also read my book, No Grain, No Pain, where I also do a deep dive into this topic and others. Okay, let's dive into your questions. Let's see. Grain-free for 6 months. When I drink something warm or hot, I get a teaspoon of clear, viscous saliva after taking each sip. I do tend to have weird sinus pressure, which I'm taking quercetin for. You may have some microbial over trying to take supplementation should work with somebody who's, knowledgeable about supplementation before doing mega doses of anything. As a general rule, vitamins and minerals are pretty safe. That being said, be smart about it and have her work with a good, educated nutritional doctor or practitioner who understands pregnancy and the needs of mothers and babies during pregnancy without creating some type of megadose schematic or structure that's not necessary. I heard that wheat products from Europe were okay, but I feel intestinal heaviness. Yeah, I mean, it's nonsense. If you're gluten sensitive, doesn't matter where the wheat's grown, it doesn't matter how the wheat's grown. If you are gluten sensitive or celiac, wheat's off the table. Now, a lot of people get confused because maybe they don't have a diagnosis. Maybe you're not actually formally diagnosed with celiac or gluten sensitivity. And so a lot of people have found benefit just navigating their way grain-free, because of doctors like myself and my book and products and information. And so they never really are formally diagnosed. But if you have gluten sensitivity, you should not eat wheat ever. Now, some people aren't gluten sensitive. Some people are reacting to the genetic manipulation or hybridization of grains, certain strains of grains. Some people are reacting to the glyphosate or to the chemicals being sprayed on the crop, pre and post harvest to desiccate and dry the crop. So not everyone is gluten sensitive. Not everyone in the world. It's estimated that between 13 and 40% of the general population has gluten sensitivity, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and it's estimated that about 1% of the population has celiac disease. So when people are out there talking about, well, just buy the European stuff, make sure it's organic, and then mill it fresh on your own, and you won't have a problem. That's not true if you're gluten sensitive. Now, it may be true if you're reacting to the glyphosate in traditionally grown grains, but Europe isn't magic. There's not like magic soil over there that makes their stuff better. As a general rule, a lot of the countries there don't have the application of glyphosate. So some people do find themselves able to consume grain in Europe, but those people are more than likely not gluten sensitive, and they've been reacting to the chemicals and the processed agents found in most American products. But remember, there's both things exist. You can react to the processed chemicals. You can also be gluten sensitive. But if you are gluten sensitive, don't go eat the grain in Europe and think it's going to be okay. You're going to wreck yourself. Those of you who aren't sure, and you're watching this, maybe you're trying to get accommodated to what gluten sensitivity is and what it all means. If you want to confirm whether or not you should be avoiding gluten, do the genetic link below for you. Simple. Babies can do it. Adults can do it. Don't harbor your data. We don't sell your data. But it tells you, do you have predisposition for reacting to gluten? Because if you do, and you go about the rest of your life anyway, some research shows there's an increased risk of a 400% increased risk of early death, mortality. So the question comes up a lot, can gluten kill you? Probably not overnight, but it can certainly drive inflammation and drive your body into deterioration of autoimmunity and hyperinflammation. And, fast forward that 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it's that accumulation of damage over time. It will not only ruin your quality of life, but actually can end your life early as well. So knowing is best, right? Test, don't guess. If going gluten-free has been super helpful for you and you just want to keep doing it, great, do it. But if you're trying to really figure it out, get a test done so that you're not in the dark about it. Holly says, I don't know what to eat as part of a vegetarian, especially breakfast. So Holly, if you're a vegetarian, there's a lot of foods to eat. I mean, most vegetarians are what I would call grainitarians, where they're eating just predominantly processed grain-based products that are labeled plant-based and vegetarian. I don't know if that's you or not. I'm not trying to accuse you of anything. I'm just simply saying that's been my experience. Now, that being said, there's hundreds of varieties of fruits, nuts, seeds, vegetables that can be consumed that are vegetarian in nature. And depending on how strict of a vegetarian you are, maybe there's eggs and maybe there's maybe there's fish or dairy that you're willing to consume. You might want to consider those things as well. Let's see. As a general rule of thumb, suggest supplements for a person with alopecia areata. So alopecia areata is actually can be caused by gluten. A lot of people don't realize that. I've had cases actually. I think we have published a case online a number of years ago, but it's actually a dietitian came to see me, and she had severe alopecia areata. It was gluten-free diet, and within a year's time, her hair was completely regrown. Diet solved it. No supplements per se were needed. It was predominantly diet change. So I would encourage you, Solomon, to look at changing your diet to the gluten-free diet, grain-free specifically. And as far as like supporting hair growth, there's lots of different things that you can take, but I would think about really 3 core things to use. One would be a good quality multivitamin like Ultra Nutrients. One would be a good quality omega-3, high dose omega-3, 2 grams a day. And the third would be biotin. If we're talking about hair growth, biotin's a B vitamin. It's known as the hair vitamin. And so that would just be generically what you could try or attempt to use. But remember that alopecia areata is an autoimmune process. And if you're going to arrest it or get it under control, you have to figure out what's triggering it. For many, that trigger is gluten. So diet change is probably more effective in that situation than, say, supplementation. It's so hard to figure out what to feed my 4-year-old autistic grandson who can't have gluten. We started buying gluten-free. Now know that's also junk. I just cook him meat as much as possible. Keep doing it. Look, variety is great, but it's better to have less variety and not have garbage food, right? Because a lot of people call variety, they're eating a variety of junk foods and they call that variety. But in reality, it's better to just eat plain and simple, whole, real foods, meats, vegetables, fruits, nuts are a great place to start. And making sure they're not processed, cook them at home. Don't go out to eat. A lot of you are stuck in that mode that you have to eat out at a restaurant, or that you want to eat out at a restaurant, or that there's a social ramification to going out to eat. And some of you just work and you're tired at the end of the day and you don't want to have to cook your own food, and it's easier to eat out. I get it. I've been there. I've been in all those situations. But in the end, this has both been my own personal experience, but it's also been my experience with 25 years of clinical practice, that if you continue to eat out, what you're going to be eating are pesticides, chemicals, dyes, additives, preservatives, things like meat glue, not healthy, not good for you. Now, it's different if you've got farm to table, organic, fare restaurants. But if we're talking about just general eating out, a lot of people think Chick-fil-A is the healthy fast food. A lot of people think that, you can get a salad at McDonald's and that's somehow healthy. I had one woman one time, she said, she was diabetic. Her blood sugar was over 500. She said, Dr. Osborne, my diet's super clean. So I said, tell me about your diet. She starts listing off the foods that she's eating, and then she gets to orange. I'm like, what do you mean orange? Are you eating oranges? She says, no, orange soda. I said, how much orange soda are you drinking a day? She says 2 or 3. And I said, well, you can't do that. Orange soda is just full of sugar, and you're diabetic and your blood sugar's over 500. You're not going to get better if you keep doing that. Her belief was orange soda was healthy because it was orange. So she argued with me. She says, you don't understand. It's orange. It's okay. It's orange. I said, no, it's not okay. It's sugar. That's how brainwashed many people are. And not to say that my viewers here are brainwashed. More specifically, it's to say, look, what you think is healthy because you've been fed the same propaganda that everyone else has may be misleading. That's why you're here. It's to learn about that misleading information. So be open to change. But the best thing that you can do, if we're talking about going gluten-free, is eat at home, eat real whole foods, 100% grain-free. I don't understand that, Melinda. If your friend can't afford a nutritionist and she's on Medicaid, how's she going to afford having a baby? She's pregnant. I mean, no offense to your friend, but I mean, how do you bring another life in the world when you can't afford your own? I don't know. I have my own opinions about that. I wish her all the best, but if she can't afford a nutritionist, then the best thing that she could do would be to get a solid prenatal and a solid omega-3 and call it even. And don't worry about mega dosing different nutrients. Outside of that, eat a real clean, chemical-free diet. Best way to raise testosterone in women, mine is very low. It depends. There's a lot of reasons why testosterone could be low, Sharon, but if we're talking about one of the quickest, easiest ways to increase testosterone, it would be with weight resistance training. A lot of women fear resistance training because they're worried their muscles will get too big. But in reality, it's one of the most effective ways to improve upon testosterone levels. Outside of that, you've got to really look at reducing your exposure to chemically related and environmental estrogens, things like phthalates, plasticizers, things in plastic bottles, plastic cups, spoons, silverware. Cosmetics are full of plasticizers and plastic chemicals. Pesticides are estrogen mimicking compounds that can affect testosterone. But if you haven't gone gluten-free, Sharon, we know for a fact that gluten causes a whole spectrum of hormone disruption. There's a name for it, actually. It's called polyendocrine syndrome. And one of the side effects is testosterone deficiency. See it all the time. How to lower B6 that is elevated without supplementation. If you're trying to get your B6 to go lower, just don't supplement with it. I don't understand. Maybe reframe the question. I'm not sure what your question is. How well does choline in our food cross the blood-brain barrier? Yeah, they cross the blood-brain barrier just fine. I just completed mold remediation. Thoughts on mold foggers? You're asking about a particular company, Lynn, and I don't recommend that mold fogger so much. From a fogging perspective, if you're trying to apply an antifungal product through fogging, I really more recommend like a humidifier as opposed to a spray fogger. Spray foggers get everything wet, but a humidifier isn't going to just splash a mess everywhere. It's going to kind of diffuse through the environment. So if you're trying to fog with something, that I would more recommend that as a solution. But be careful and don't apply fogging too much, because remember, what causes mold to grow is excessive moisture. So fogging application should be done one and done, and you shouldn't do it more than maybe once or twice a year if you're trying to be preventative. Let's see. Suman says, severe allergies, can't smell, poor digestion, giving up wheat and dairy. You got to give up more than that, Suman. You got to give up grain. So, get the rice out. Please make a video on asthma. We have one. Can we post that for Suman, our video? We got a comprehensive one coming your way right now, Suman. Do all glutens from different sources, corn, rice, etc., have the same impact on the body if gluten sensitive? My friend is bothered by rice, but not corn. No, they all have pretty much the same impact. In my experience, they do. Remember, there's a term in the literature called silent celiac disease. A lot of people don't realize this, but you could be consuming a food that's bad for you and there's no symptoms until there are. We call that silent disease, silent celiac disease. And many people will go their whole lives eating gluten and, come 40, 50, get a diagnosis of a gluten-related cancer like lymphoma. You don't want to take a risk like that. Now, if your friend is gluten sensitive, if this is what you're referring to, I think it was your friend. He's physically acutely bothered by rice, but not physically acutely bothered by corn. And being bothered physically acutely is not the only way people are affected. Low-grade inflammation consistently drawn out over time, in my opinion, is more insidious than eating a food and feeling a reaction right away, because at least when you're feeling a reaction right away, you know to avoid it. Is there a protocol to remove mycotoxins from my body? Anything that you recommend? We're actually about to publish, Marie, a very comprehensive guide on mold and mycotoxin detoxification. I would encourage you to check out our new mold resource called Mold Jacked, and you can go to moldjacked.com to check that resource out. How do you know if it is gluten or not? Problems with the stomach when you don't take up nutrition. Well, I think if you're going to try to figure out whether it's gluten or not, you need to get tested. As I mentioned earlier, test, don't guess. There's so many people are on the fence. They're like, should I go on the diet? Should I not go on the diet? And then they kind of, excuse my language, half-assedly commit to the diet and don't do it right. And then they don't get better. And then they say, oh, that didn't work for me. And in reality, they just didn't commit. It's a 12-week learning curve. It's why we created the Glutenology Master Class, is to try to help people accelerate that learning curve and to have a comprehensive resource to navigate the diet intelligently and properly. That being said, get tested. Don't sit in wonderment and wonder if it's the right thing to do, and then kind of do it, and then don't get better. My grandson's therapy in school insists they have snacks at school, and I try to feed him just meals. It's ridiculous. He doesn't need to eat all day. I agree. I think a lot of the processes in a lot of the different schools are wrong. We all have our opinions about that, but we created a term. I created a term years ago called OPF, other people's food. And my philosophy on OPF is I don't eat it. And it's not to be offensive to the other people. It's because other people are ignorant about food, about where food comes from, how it's grown, what's actually in it. And so they'll innocently feed you something that's actually poison, thinking, I'm sharing food and good camaraderie and good love with this person. And reality is they're poisoning you because they don't know any better. So, so the schools should really stay out of it, because they've made a total mess of children's nutrition. I mean, they classify corn syrup and ketchup as vegetables, and have no place feeding our kids or having any role in the nutritional aspect of our children. In my opinion, if I could wave a magic wand, kids would go to school with homemade meals in their lunch sacks or lunch boxes. How often have you seen celiacs with diabetes antibodies? Are you talking about type 1 diabetes? If you're talking about type 1 diabetes, it's very common. The genetic overlap between type 1 diabetes and celiac disease is identical. The DQ8 and the DQ2 genotypes confer risk to development of type 1 diabetes autoimmunity. So it's not that all celiacs develop type 1 diabetes, but there's a larger percentage of celiacs that can develop type 1 diabetes, and vice versa. Does gluten and dairy products increase the inflammation, even if I don't have, trying to figure it out if I have, any problems with these products? Yeah, I mean, why, if you're worried about gluten, why are you going gluten and dairy free if you're not sure that you should be, Jason? I guess that would be my question for you, but get tested. If you're worried about whether or not, again, it goes back to getting confirmation so that you know what direction to take, and that you're not in some kind of dietary limbo, hurting yourself some days and doing well on other days. Remember that gluten antibodies have a half-life of 60 to 90 days-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood. So you're talking about one breadcrumb of gluten causing inflammation that can last for several months. So if you're not dialed in and you cheat once a week, or you cheat twice a week, or every 2 weeks, you're going to be chronically inflamed. Maybe not be as bad as if you drank beer and ate Subway sandwiches every night for dinner, but it doesn't take much gluten exposure to create inflammatory damage for an extensive period of time. So if you want to choose this correct diet, you really should consider testing so that you know what to do. I have ApoE4 gene, and I'm concerned about overdoing fats. I'm gluten, dairy, and soy free, but I really enjoy nuts and seeds. Are these safe for me in larger quantities if I am slim? For the most part, yes. People with ApoE, where they really have to be careful, is overdoing saturated fat more than just overdoing dietary fat, Terry. That being said, if you really are trying to, understand your risk. The other thing that you can do, because don't blame your genes. Like the ApoE4 gene is definitely a predisposition factor for cardiovascular inflammation and Alzheimer's disease, but it isn't a guarantee. And so if you're eating whole, real food that you're not sensitive or allergic to, if you're exercising, getting adequate sunshine, going to bed on time, breathing clean air, and drinking clean water, you pretty much can mitigate the risk of, the predisposition risk of that gene. So don't rely too heavily on that genetic information as a fear point in your life. And you can get additional testing done. You can have inflammatory markers measured periodically to make sure you're doing it right, and that you're not being susceptible to the elements of chronic inflammation over your choices. Are essential oil diffusers safe? Yes, for the most part. I mean, you have to worry about certain oils in animals, but if you're talking about, and sometimes people can have, allergic reactions to some of the oils. I mean, they're plant compounds, just like you can be allergic to a food. You can certainly be allergic to an oil, but as a general rule, they're relatively safe. Sunshine has many health benefits, some unknown. How would you recommend a pregnant friend modify the sun time? To tolerance. I mean, go outside every day and get as much sun as your skin can tolerate without burning, and don't use sunscreen. That's how I would recommend, whether you're pregnant or whether you're not. It's always that way. What's the best way to educate people on the health risks of mold in their homes, especially if they are experiencing water damage? I mean, you can talk to them, you can give them, send them to Mold Jack. We've got several guides, free guides on risks of mold and symptoms of mold exposure, diseases linked to mold, and that kind of thing. But I've just found that if you're trying to force educate somebody who doesn't want to be educated, you're not going to have a great degree of success in that attempt. It's not to say you shouldn't try. But try once, maybe twice, and if it's falling on deaf ears, you've done your best. And sometimes you've got to let people come to an unfortunate pain point in their life before they're really, really ready to listen or make changes. That's been my experience. Is simply put, the level of a person's pain, discomfort, or illness has to be greater than their fear of change, or they won't take on any new information to want to make that change. People grow when they're forced to grow, typically. Not everyone, but many. If you suffer from AFib, can you take testosterone? Talk with your doctor. I mean, you could, but why do you have AFib? And go back, and why do you need testosterone? Those would be the two questions. Why would you want to take testosterone? Why not figure out why your testosterone is low? And why do you have AFib? Let's figure out why that's happening. I think, as far as can you take them together, if you have them both, talk with whoever your cardiologist or doc is that's making that recommendation. But I'm not a big believer in synthetic medications before diet and lifestyle change have been attempted first. I think most people's problems are resolved in that way. Most people's non-acute traumatic problems, non-traumatic problems are solved through diet and lifestyle. So seed oils are bad. How about seed butters? I'm talking about sunflower and seed butter. I mean, I would minimize any kind of seed oils or seed butters as much as possible, Lita. Anytime you crack that seed, and whether you make the oil or you make the butter, what's happening to the fat in that seed is it begins to oxidize. And so when you have oxidized omega-6 fatty acids, that's a recipe for increased risk of inflammation. Now, if you wanted to take some seeds, let's say some sunflower seeds, and make your own butter in a little food processor where you crush your own seeds up and then immediately proceed to use the butter, it's going to have less time to oxidize. But once it's in that jar sitting on that shelf and you open it and it takes you 6 months to go through a jar of this stuff, it's, by the time you get, a few days into that bottle, it's going to be oxidizing pretty rapidly and rancidifying, and eating rancid seed oils is just not a good idea. Different doctors have different opinions on low sodium. I am always just under lab range. I've heard it could mean adrenal fatigue. Others say to cut down on water. I drink half my body weight. Thoughts? Yeah, add some salt to your water. Add some electrolytes to your water. That's a simple input. It's also, Mary, consider the source of the water. If it's reverse osmosis water, you're drinking water that's been depleted of mineral electrolytes, and that can affect your sodium levels as well. So you might consider, if you're drinking RO, to definitely add trace and ultra trace minerals into the water through some type of high quality electrolyte. Got to watch out with some of these brands of electrolytes. They're full of a bunch of chemical processed junk too. So be careful on what you pick. Let's see. Why do I have swollen lymph nodes under my armpits? I don't know. Could it be due to gluten? It could be. Can gluten cause swollen nodes? Yeah, absolutely. So too could an infection. Mold could do it. Heavy metals could create swelling. B vitamin deficiencies could cause swollen lymph nodes. Zinc deficiency could cause swollen lymph nodes. So there's many things that could potentially contribute to that as a problem. But, is it gluten? Possibly. Get tested. Change or just change your diet and see if it goes away, and you'll have an answer in that regard. How do you feel about bentonite clay? I like bentonite clay. I think it has some purposes. Mainly as a binding agent, bentonite clays can be good for binding mold toxins. They can also be good for binding other toxic compounds that you might get exposure to. So in that regard, that would be probably one of the most consistent reasons why it might be a recommendation. I have some brain damage, foggy from misprocessed bamboo cyanide poisoning. Is there anything I can do to reverse this? I flushed it and ordered methylene blue as an antidote. I don't know that I agree with methylene blue as an antidote, but the best thing you can really do if you've been poisoned is to support your body's detoxification, your phase 1, 2, and 3 detoxification systems. So consider milk thistle and calcium D-glucarate and methylated B vitamins as a premise to aid and support your liver's ability to detoxify and water solubilized toxins. Lots of water. You want lots of water because you want your kidneys pushing that stuff out as quickly as possible, and make sure you're not constipated so that your gut is pushing regular bowel movements, because those are the 3 main exit routes for poisons. So support those exit routes. Outside of that, you could consider a good quality probiotic as well, especially a multi-strain version. Many probiotics have tremendous ability to do what's called adsorption, where they can bind toxins. But many of them also have chemicals that they produce that can actually degrade toxins or break them down. So the microbiome, our microbiome, is very critical, very important for our ability to detoxify. Diagnosed with bipolar type 2 and eat bread every day. Can this affect my illness? Absolutely. It could be causing your illness. I've seen cases of bipolar get better with gluten-free diets. As a matter of fact, one of the original kind of terminologies medically for schizophrenia, I know it's not bipolar, but it's called bread madness. It's because bread has psychoactive substances in it. It can alter the way that you think and feel. And for many, that manifests as schizophrenic or schizoaffective or bipolar. Whether it's mania or whether it's depression or the combination of the two. Can eating gluten when gluten sensitive cause white blood cell count? Yes, and so can mold. Those are probably the 2 most common things I see drop white counts in humans. I have a 20-year-old son that just started Strattera, the medication I assume. I know that he's an adult and he decides to help him. And have you ever seen pets affect affecting health and immune system. You can just help him by encouraging him to be healthier, right? 20 years old, I don't know what he's eating or how he's eating. But a lot of 20-year-olds are eating processed food as their staple in their diet. So I encourage him to move away from that side of the equation. That would be a great first step. As far as can pets affect health? In what way? You mean like a companion pet? Or do you mean like the stuff that pets carry, the dander and other things? I mean, pets can affect health in a good or a bad way. There are people that have service animals that it's tremendously helpful for them. And then there are also animals that, people can have reactions to their dander. And so, pick your angle and I can give you a better answer. Tanya says, please make some compilation videos so I can listen to them when I go to sleep. Tanya, go to my YouTube channel and select Crash Course Playlist. It's one of our playlists, and just put the headphones in and hit play, and it'll go through the whole playlist of crash courses. We have hundreds of crash courses on a variety of topics, and that goes for any of you who want to just learn more. Dive into that crash course list. Let's see here. As far as the sun goes, you can download the weather app, and I think it's more a comment. What are my thoughts on lymphatic massage? I think exercise should be your lymphatic massage, and a lot of people opt for a passive therapy instead of doing the work themselves. Passive therapy means something else does the work, right? Active therapy means it's you taking responsibility for yourself. That's not to say that lymphatic massage can't be helpful. I'm sure there's probably a masseuse in the audience who's going to yell at me now. No, I mean, look, the reality is if you're doing your exercise and doing things right, you shouldn't need lymphatic massage. Many people get lymphatic massage because they've had years of, self-deprecation and self-harm through bad food choice, poor exercise habits, poor sleep habits. And so lymphatic massage as a passive therapy can be very helpful to kind of help get them back to their feet, get them back to functioning better. So in that regard, it can be beneficial. But if you're healthy and thriving, how beneficial is a lymphatic massage going to be, let's say, over like rebounder or exercise? Exercise, hands down, is a far more superior self-care tactic. Which healthy fat do you recommend for cooking? I don't really cook with oils. I know a lot of people are like, what do you mean? I really just tend to let the animal oil that I'm cooking with be the oil. But if you're wanting to cook with an oil, I guess you could use coconut oil, you could use avocado oil, you could use beef tallow, you could use duck fat. Those are all decent options. When you're cooking, you want an oil that can sustain higher temperatures, and that's typically your saturated fats, which is the opposite of what most people have been told is good for them. But anyway, hopefully that gives you a little guidance. Is it better to avoid gluten and dairy even if you are intolerant, or even if you tolerate it? In your book, you wrote that eating cereals reduces the absorption of nutrients because I hear what you're saying, Jason. My opinion, yes. I mean, we have diseases like beriberi and pellagra that were responsible for thousands of deaths a year because of processed cereal products. Processed cereal products are junk. Now, one could argue, well, what about non-processed? What about if I buy, an organic heirloom grain and do all of my own milling and make my everything from scratch and that way? Well, if you're not gluten sensitive, more power to you. It's probably okay because there's more nutrient density in that type of food. But if you're talking about any kind of processed food in the United States, if it's a processed grain, by law, they cannot sell it unless they fortify it with synthetic vitamins so that it doesn't cause malnutrition and kill you. To me, that's the antithesis of what food is about, right? We don't want to have to add garbage to food to make it not hurt us. So in that regard, I would say avoid it. There are other reasons to avoid grain if you're not gluten intolerant. I mean, it's 25% of the Earth's grain crops are contaminated with mycotoxins at high enough levels to cause harm. So that's one reason. Another reason might be that quantitatively, how much of it are you eating? Because the carbohydrate value of grains, that it was last analyzed, the last I read was like 60% of calories in the US come from wheat alone. That's a tremendous amount of food from one thing. That's what I was saying about variety. We don't have a variety diet, at least not in the US and in the UK. The diet is predominantly grain. And if you look at the health consequences of both cultures, it's horrible. Grain has high omega-6 to 3 ratio fatty acid, which promotes inflammation. It's super high carbohydrate, so it puts people in carbohydrate overload, raising their triglycerides, increasing their fat storage, and causing blood sugar problems and obesity. So there's a lot of reasons to avoid grain beyond just the gluten, but those are a few. I don't understand. You're saying genetic analysis revealed that saturated fats are not recommended for my child. I would argue about what genetic analysis that you had done, because there's not a genetic analysis that can tell you don't eat saturated fat versus eat saturated fat. So I'd argue whoever sold you that genetic test doesn't. They're promoting something. Maybe they're pushing something else. I don't know. But I wouldn't agree with that statement. Recommendations for a dog bite. Tetanus shot. Why would you want to get a tetanus shot anyway? I mean, anyway, that's just my opinion of it. For a dog bite, I'd say if anything, people would be more scared of rabies than tetanus from a dog. I mean, clean the wound. Apply, some natural antibacterial, antimicrobial agents to it. Like you could use silver. You could use. Some people use iodine. As a natural agent. You could clean the wound with peroxide. I mean, there's just a lot of things that you could do just to be preventative. And if, obviously if the wound is deep enough, go get some stitches, get it sewn up. But if it's just a minor bite, just keep an eye on the wound, keep it clean, and let it heal. I mean, there's not an increased risk of tetanus for a dog bite, really. I like this comment, Dr. Osborne. Your advice to at least get sleep between 10 and 2 help me just to get rid of insomnia. They are just magical hours. Yep, that's it. 10 to 2 minimum, preferably more. But allergic to avoid cane. Sir, if you're looking at their mix, mimic gluten. So if you're gluten sensitive, classically is considered a gluten-free pseudo cereal, but it's not one that I recommend if you're trying to adhere to no grain, no pain. A friend that just had massive weight loss developed a peanut allergy at 42. Was your friend happen to be on a GLP-1 drug like Ozempic with the massive weight loss? Because the massive weight loss that comes along with those drugs, comes along with pancreatic damage and enzymatic degradation, liver damage, bone loss, muscle loss, and immune system deterioration. So all that could be playing a role. That's a possibility. Otherwise I don't have enough context to give you a better answer. Yeah, I like this comment here too. In the US, even the products which claim to be gluten-free are full of gluten. We tested many products in a lab in Europe. The laws are very strict, and soil is not contaminated like here. Yeah, I mean, you got to be careful. How do you reduce uric acid levels? Start with some good vitamin C and cherry juice. Those are great ways to naturally help bring down uric acid. But on top of that, diet change. Let's see here. Had a genetic blood draw at my endocrinologist. He labeled me as hyperabsorber of cholesterol and plant sterols. They were all in the high range. And what does the high range mean? The whole thing about cholesterol, for probably 90% of people is just junk. Cholesterol is not a risk factor. For the vast majority of you that have been told that it is, and lowering cholesterol actually can contribute to severe detriment of your health, including myalgias and early onset dementia. The cholesterol is so critical for hormone. Bad cholesterol, LDL, is necessary to make estrogen and testosterone. It's also necessary to make progesterone. So if you're blocking it for fear of a future disease you don't yet have, which, first of all, no doctor can predict the future to me. Anyway, we won't go there. It's just not something I recommend buying into. If you haven't, there's a really good book on the topic called The Cholesterol Myth. I would encourage any of you who've been told you need to be on medicine for cholesterol to check that book out. We also have a really good video on the topic called The Cholesterol Myth that you should go and watch and learn a little bit more about it. What do you like to use coconut oil for? Depends on the recipe. I mean, you can use coconut oil, more to impart kind of its flavor in cooking, depending on what you're trying to cook. Like, it's really good with curries if you're doing like a coconut curry or something along that line. As far as MCT oil, I really don't use MCT oil tremendously. I know a lot of people love it for the supplemental because they want to take it because it gives them energy. But it's just, I'm not a big fan of processed oils. I think if you can eat the food in its whole form, you're going to be far better off. I think that lesson we've learned repetitively over and over and over again, but keep making the same mistake, is that it's highly processed foods. Trends come and go. What doesn't come and go is just the integrity of the food that our planet can make, right? The integrity that God put into nature. And so I think a lot of these trends around highly processed things to add for health are just that, they're trends, and they come and go because in the end the truth is revealed when they're not super effective, or they don't really work the way they thought they were supposed to work. It's really hard to go wrong with real organic whole food that you're not allergic or intolerant to. Are red lentils safe to eat? It can be. Depends on the person. And do you know a good protocol for metal detoxing a toddler? Toddlers are tough because some of the best detoxifying agents are produced in pill form. I would say if you can get a good product with maybe some fulvic acid, that can be used. That's sometimes been shown to bind if you can get zeolite and even activated charcoal. But you've got to be real careful with toddlers and metal detoxification, and don't really recommend trying to do it without a good doctor. And the reason why is little babies like that, they're growing, and as they're growing, at the end of the day, they need minerals. And if you start giving them binding agents to bind heavy metals, don't forget that those same binding agents will bind healthy metals like calcium and magnesium and zinc and selenium, etc. And if you get to doing that indefinitely, you could affect their mineral status and potentially affect their growth and their health overall. So I'd be real careful in that regard. As far as a metal detox for an adult, we have a whole show on how to detox metals that you can go check out, with some general recommendations for things that you can attempt to do. The positive TTG is tissue transglutaminase. So your question is, do positive TTG IgA tests always mean celiac, or could they mean you just have Hashimoto's if biopsies are negative and you have high TPO antibodies? No. I would argue if you have a positive TTG IgA, you're reacting most likely to gluten. Not necessarily that you've developed. You have to understand, Jennifer, what the criteria for diagnosing celiac disease is. Yes, you need a positive TTG, but to follow that up, you need what's called a positive biopsy for villus atrophy. And if your biopsies are negative, doesn't mean you're not celiac. It just means the damage may not have shown up yet, or the damage may not be present from the biopsy that was taken. Remember that the intestinal surface area, small intestinal surface area, is the size of a tennis court. It's 22 foot long. It's very large. And when you're taking a microscopic biopsy, or a few of them, you're not necessarily finding the area that has the damage. You could find an area that's perfectly normal and in essence have a false normal biopsy, and then be misled. I actually, the most I've seen, I had a patient, 19 biopsies, normal, 20th biopsy was positive. It took decades for her to get the diagnosis, and she kept going back because she was certain or felt certain that she had the problem, but the doctors kept telling her she didn't because the biopsy was inaccurate in its ability to assess her. So if you've got positive TTG, it's a good, safe bet that going gluten-free is probably the right move for you to do, and it's not just a Hashimoto's issue. Remember that gluten can cause Hashimoto's, and that's what a lot of people forget. Gluten can cause Hashimoto's. There's multiple human trials now on gluten-free diets, reducing TPO antibodies and reducing thyroglobulin antibodies, and helping people with thyroid hormone improve their health, or helping people with hypothyroid Hashimoto's improve their health. Can taurine increase dopamine or oxytocin? I haven't seen anything directly showing taurine does that, but taurine's helpful for a lot of other things. Have you checked out our crash course on taurine? If not, I would strongly recommend that you do. Do I have SIBO? Hard to lose weight, so bloated. I don't know if you have SIBO. I mean, you could get a test. The general testing for SIBO is what's called a breath test, where they're measuring hydrogen and methane gas. Most doctors will do that to help you get a diagnosis. But you might not have SIBO. You might have SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, in which case that can also cause difficulty with weight loss and bloating, as many other things can as well. So hard to know for sure, Holly. I'd recommend you follow up with a good doc and get some testing done so that you can get a good determination of what's going on. Are potatoes okay on a gluten-free diet? Yes, potatoes are gluten-free. Where people get into trouble with potatoes, some people react to nightshades, potatoes to nightshade. And so in that regard, some people, have that type of a reaction. But as a rule of thumb, potatoes are gluten-free and are okay on a gluten-free diet, minus the nuance of personal individualization. I have RA, and it's been 2 months since I started the no-grain diet, but also no dairy. I feel the difference. Thank you. But in Argentina, I had ice cream without a reaction. Your thoughts? There's different kinds of dairy, and there's different ways that we can react to dairy. Some people are allergic to dairy. Some people are sensitive to dairy. Some people are lactose intolerant. Some people react to A1 versus A2 types of dairy. There's just a lot to unpack with the dairy question. Marianella, have you watched my video on dairy? I've done a comprehensive breakdown on the nuance of dairy, and it might be helpful for you. Let's see. Flour I think the maybe a language barrier here, but flour has halogens. You're talking about brominated flour, most likely, Orba. A lot of flours in the U.S., wheat flours, have bromine in them, so they brominate them. If you look on the bag of the flour, it'll say brominated. That's bromine. And what that is it's a dough conditioner. It makes the bread chewier, and it conditions it for cooking. And the problem with bromine in our wheat is that bromine's a halogen that binds to the thyroid gland receptors, and it prevents the uptake of iodine into your thyroid. So it can cause iodine deficiency, subsequently can contribute to thyroid problems related to that. But also, the thyroid, or the iodine, is not just part of the thyroid. The iodine is very important for progesterone, and it's important for ovarian function and estrogen production. So any high level of bromines that you're being exposed to are not bromine, bromine's halogens. So that would be bromine, but also would be fluoride, and also would be chlorine or chloride. Not so much sodium chloride, but chlorine, like in your drinking water, as an agent to kill bacteria. Those can all affect your iodine uptake, and over time, that can lead to or lend toward iodine deficiency, which can have other health consequences nutritionally. Not sure what flour has to do with cholesterol. Well, flour certainly can. I've seen flours, not flours as in the rose petal flours, but flours as in grain-based flours. I've seen them effectively. I've seen people's cholesterol drop 100, 150 points when they go grain-free. That is something that we've observed over the years, but mechanistically we don't know why. It's an observation. I have AFib. The blood test showed low vitamin E. How to increase it? Is it safe to take supplements? Sure. Get you a good tocotrienol vitamin E. We have one called Ultra Tocotrienol. We have another product called Ultra E. Either one of those, very safe to take if you have AFib. Remember, vitamin E is very important for blood viscosity. And when your blood is thick and sticky, you could have problems certainly with with your heart pumping it properly. Let's see. Maybe to understand in most cases whether fully gluten-free is good to keep track of your blood tests. And what exactly are processed grains? Store-bought, not fried, buckwheat in a packet is processed. So processed would mean any processed grain means it's ground. It's pre-ground. The seed itself is generally not processed. The seed is the actual grain. But when most people buy it, they're buying it in a bag, and the grain itself has been broken open. It's been milled. Generally, the ectoderm layer has been stripped away. It's where a lot of the vitamins and minerals are, and you're left with largely the inside aspect of the grain, which is the soft and gooey, chewy part. It's where your glutens are, and that's processed. So if the seed's been cracked and it's been milled, then you're buying processed, Jason. That's the gist of it. Now, when you buy a non-processed food, you're going to take it home and process it, but you're going to process it and eat it immediately, typically. So the difference is time of exposure to oxygen and light. The longer a food is broken open and exposed to air and light and the elements, it will begin to oxidize and break down and rot, right? It's what happens, right? You leave it out on the counter, then the bacteria, the fungi, the light, the water, the air are all going to start deteriorating that food and breaking it down and start to recycle it back to the earth. So you want to eat it as fresh as you can, as a general rule of thumb. And that's why, old food that sits out on the counter, old meat that sits out on the counter has the potential to become to fester bacteria and become problematic if you eat it. So anyway, okay, I think we wrapped it up. So if those of you who are new to the show, make sure you come check us out at glutenfreesociety.org. If you'd like more information about the gluten-free diet and how to navigate health and wellness and autoimmune, if you're trying to recover from autoimmunity, just go sign up there and we'll send you a bunch of really fantastic free information on how to navigate diet. Make sure you check out this week. We are opening registration for Glutenology. It's absolutely free. All you have to do is register, and we'll send you the modules that you can watch over the course of the next week. Just click the link. We'll put that link up. It's glutenology.net/registration. Again, that's a free service to you guys in honor of Celiac Awareness Month, which is May. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend. We'll be back next Tuesday for another episode of Dr. Osborne Zone, and Thursday again